Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our listeners joining us from across the globe. Welcome to this next edition of the Learning Curve podcast powered by KNOLSKAPE, where we try and decode how leadership development is enabling individual and organizational performances. My name is Dr. Ritwik Mishra. I'm the Chief Client Officer at KNOLSKAPE and your host for this edition of the podcast. Leaders today are operating in and managing uncertainties. Now, these uncertainties are driven by several external and internal factors. Some of the external factors are your globally connected economies, the geopolitical situation that we are all seeing across the globe, and increased complex regulatory requirements. Some of the internal factors are just availability of good skilled talent, inclusion aspects, and a multi generational workforce. All of this is adding to the uncertainty at workplace. Now, leaders are expected to stand through all of this, create a clean, clear, unambiguous strategy, take people along with them, and help individuals perform as well. Which basically means that they are trying to futurize, humanize, and personalize the workplace, and the workforce. Now, to decode the how of all of this, we have the perfect guest lined up for all of you today. He has developed leaders and led leadership development for large, complex, fast moving organizations like Deloitte, Medtronic, and Bristol Myers Squibb. With over 2 decades of experience in leadership development, he has led large culture transformation work. He has pioneered learning at scale and designed and delivered impactful leadership development programs across sectors and geographies. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Orlando, Chief Learning Officer at Bristol Myers Squibb, to this edition. Jeff, a very warm welcome to you.
Oh, thank you, Ritwik. And, I think we are all leading in the shadows a little bit. Like I am in my home office today, a little a little cloudy here. But thanks for having me on your podcast. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff. Looking forward to this conversation. But before we move into the questions that we have for you, we typically do a quick rapid fire section. And I hope you're comfortable with the section and for the questions that are coming through. So are you ready for this one?
Let's hear it. Let's do it.
All right. What's the best advice that you have ever received about leadership?
Followership is more important than leadership.
Nice. Very nice. And what's the worst advice that you have received about leadership?
I think it's in the vein of, leadership is about one person, one idea, that compelling figure, right? It's really about the many, not the one, right?
And I think with that background that we spoke about uncertainties, it's the community that you're creating, right? Everybody has their own bit to lead and their own bit to do and perform in order for the organization to work. Mm-hmm. So thanks for that input, Jeff. What's your go-to productivity hack?
I really, this will sound trite, but I really have become an AI adopter. And nice. I'm most productive using AI with my children's homework, actually.
Right. Don't get the teacher to listen in on this.
Right. It's helped me, 8th grade math, right? I can relearn things more quickly with the help of AI, right, for sure. So it's definitely been something that's turned up my personal productivity in addition to my work productivity.
Yeah. And Jeff, we are going on a vacation very soon next week. And usually I would do a lot of research looking at the places to stay, the places to eat, the places to shop. It just takes a lot of time, right? But with AI, it can become your personal travel planner, and it has given us an itinerary, sharp, focused, what we wanted, and I'm ready to go, right? So I think it's doing wonders all around.
Yeah.
Very question on AI itself. AI in learning, friend, foe, or still figuring it out?
I think probably friend and foe, right? I mean, we've what is that? A frenemy, I guess, Ritwik. We've here at BMS, we as a company have a goal to lead in AI, which is obviously very important for our sector in terms of drug development, especially speed to our patients. And in learning, we've deployed a couple of AI tools that are helping us to produce learning more quickly and then get it out there more quickly in a more personalized way. And we're still dealing with how good is it, how accurate is it, how do we put safeguards in place for our way of working. So it's friend and foe, I think.
Yeah. I think nobody's got it yet. I think one of the surveys that was done with a set of organizations in India said only 1% of organizations are really confident on using AI within the workplace with the guardrails and with the ethics and governance systems in place. So I think we still have quite a bit of way to go, but you're right, a lot of focus on ethics and governance. Biggest myth about leadership development?
If you just take them to the 2-week training course, that'll learn them, right?
I love that. Yeah,
that'll learn them. And we all know that's not true, right? We all know that it's a mix of experiences that develop leaders, the good and the bad. And formal learning can be a big part of that. But peers, mentors, experiences are what really shapes us as leaders.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's the experiences that you carry to your next experience and how you translate what you learned from previous, reservoir of experiences to bring that out. But we can have a whole segment of podcast or a whole podcast on how people are or how organizations are doing trust in a 2-day workshop or collaboration through an offsite, bursting balloons, putting straws together, and it just doesn't work. And I think and I completely echo with that sentiment. Next interesting question: if you weren't in learning and development, what would you be doing?
I mean, when I was a kid, right, you took those career aptitude tests as a kid, or just had, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I always wanted to be an architect, right? I was curious about structuring things, building foundation, building up, and getting into organizational work. I've realized a lot of what I do is architect related to organization, strategy, and people, right? How we do that work. But I think it would be that. I've always had fun renovating the house, things like that. So something in the more spatial domain, I think.
Yeah. It's just that you're building leaders now, not very different.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for indulging on that, Jeff. Really interesting responses there. Let's move to the first question. And this one is really up your alley. You've led leadership development, like we said in the introduction, for large organizations across sectors and across geographies. What are some common themes that you have witnessed in leadership, in leaders across sectors? But I'm also very interested to know across geographies. Is there some common themes that are coming out? And also, if you can talk a little bit about maybe differences that you've seen because you've led teams across geographies as well, and how have you managed that?
And it's, I think the answer, Ritwik, to this question in 2025 might be different than if we were to have answered this question in 2005. And what I've seen, is the power of a globalizing world and the power of corporate culture that has made many of those regional distinctions, I wouldn't say go away, but reduce over time. So many companies have put in place operating models that are trying to drive towards commonality in terms of how they operate across the world, right? Think about some of those core systems, the finance systems, the tech systems, the performance management systems, even leadership development is a much more global process now. And corporate culture has become something that more and more CEOs have paid a lot of attention to. So you take all that and the experience of work, especially in big multinationals, has become more common around the world. And that in itself has led to many of the ways we develop leaders to become a bit more common. That being said, I mean, there are some, I would call them almost under the surface differences around the
Mm.
world that still live, in society and live in one's home life that tend to get a little quieter at work, but in times of stress, those will come out more, right? So I think the secret sauce for leadership development in these multinationals is here's what we're going to commit to it commonly, but here are some real differences based on who we are, where we live, or our experiences that we're going to talk about and reflect on too. So it's definitely a mix. And where organizations fall down is where
Yeah.
they choose one side of that story, right?
Yeah.
Everything will be my way or the highway, or
Right.
everything will be hyper local, because then you're giving up on both sides.
Right. Right. And I think a lot of organizations also shy away from really bringing up the differences up to the surface and letting people know about those differences. I think it's very really love the point about bringing that out in the open, making all the parties, all the stakeholders understand what these differences are. How do they show up, and how do you respond to those differences? That becomes important.
And it's kind of what makes work fun too, right? I mean, all these
We are doing
differences around the world and figuring them out, and how do you
this.
work with lots of different people with lots of different ways of thinking. That's part of what's fun about working globally.
I'm sure figuring out the head nod is becoming important.
You have trained me. You have.
But I do remember one of the leaders saying at Deloitte, manager is a manager is a manager, right?
Mm,
And I remember how they had taken some of what you are saying as a guideline to developing leadership development programs, where you've got some common factors and then you bring in a little bit of contextualization to the local regions.
absolutely.
So thank you so much for sharing that, Jeff. I'm going to move on to the next question. So the global corporate e-learning market is projected to reach $50 billion by 2026, fueled by immersive and digital-first approaches. In this context, how do you see organizations approaching digital transformation in learning? Are there any specific innovations that have got you really excited about when you've seen them or heard about them?
Sure. And we've recently invested here in some new technologies in this market. Pardon me, in this company. And if you think about the last maybe 15 years of learning technology, there's kind of three chapters, right? One chapter was the reign of the LMS, right? So think about the traditional LMSs, which obviously predate 15 years ago, but those
Right.
advancing. Then you had your dawn of the learning experience platforms. So there's your Degree, your Edcast, tools like that, which were deployed at
Right.
kind of most Fortune 500 companies, right? And now I'd say 2023 to present day, you have a new crop of you might call AI native learning platforms, which kind of bring together a lot of the functionality of an LMS and an LXP, and have inside of them authoring tools for learning, but
Right.
also that skills pathway execution for the learner. Layered inside of it, some new innovations like an AI tutor that
Yeah.
sits inside of it so they can see how you're learning and give you a little bit of help on the side, right? So
Yeah.
for us here, we're recently invested in that third chapter of that story where we're seeing, much more rapid ability to develop e-learning by using AI and having it do a first draft for us, right? We're seeing more
Mhm.
compelling products come to our learners because it's able to personalize, right? And we're giving more power to our various learning teams to build and deploy
Right.
learning pathways more rapidly. So I think we're finally seeing a place where learning tech for big companies is catching up to the hype that
Right.
started maybe 10 years ago.
Maybe in the same realm, I can get your quick inputs on this aspect. So there are three or four things playing out here. One is professionals today don't have time to learn, right? And there's a dated work that Josh Bersin had done showing only 1% of time that's available on learning. I'm sure that's gone down to decimals at this point in time. But professionals don't have time to learn. You've got AI coming in big way. a lot of focus on AI in learning in different ways. You've got a very discerning and fragmented learning base, right? With the multi generational workforce, everybody's got their own set of preferences, ways of learning, etc. And so you're trying to personalize it as much as possible. But then you also, and then this might be surprising or not surprising, Jeff, is that we keep getting requests for live workshop learning as well, saying, I need people to be with them, with others. I want them to come and meet others. I want them to learn from each other. Right. So we want that live workshop experiences as well. So with these three, four things, where do you see leadership development move in the future and take up most of the effort or budget from teams that are developing leadership development programs?
Man, quite the intimidating scenario you painted there, right? And we had a really interesting, almost laboratory for this during COVID as an industry, right? Where in the space of a couple of years, we had to take all of our different programming and learning and turn it into either virtual or electronic, right, for a period of time. And I can recall looking at outcome measures. You're thinking about a Kirkpatrick model, outcome measures for different types of learning during that period of time. So consider your leadership and professional skills, consider your more technical or hard skill development, right? And we were able to look at our outcomes on both of those fronts and see what happened when we went fully virtual or fully electronic. And when we looked at our technical kind of orbit of skills, we didn't see an impact in terms of the ability for an individual to learn those things. So we were doing just as well at doing them in a virtual or electronic means versus an in-person means. So that led to a lot of us in the industry pulling back on spending a lot of money for in-person courses for technical content, right? However, on the leadership development side, especially those more meta macro leadership skills, we definitely saw that pulling 100% away from a model that involved community and being together did lead to less positive outcomes in terms of developing those leaders. So, in my role here, one of my strategies is to move money towards leadership development that is a full, real blend, right? So think about virtual, think about simulation, think about coaching, think about in-person, right? A full blend. Right. But for those things that are more technical in nature, it's all good. Let's do those through skill pathways. Let's do those through other mechanisms that get just as good or sometimes even better outcomes. So that's a learning that I've applied in my role.
Nice. Thank you for walking us through that, Jeff. I think the culture, the context of the organization plays a big role here. The trends in the industry plays a big role here. The direction from the leadership plays a big role. So I think all of this coming together in shaping, how we craft out leadership development for the future. You touched upon skills, Jeff. I just want to hear your perspective. And I know that there's no right answer, and we typically stay away from calling out specific skills. But what are some top three skills that you are hearing as absolutely necessary for leaders to have? Maybe if you can help us understand this from a talent hierarchy or pyramid, right? So top leaders, what are some of the skills they should absolutely have in this day and age? Middle managers, what are some skills that they should have?
Sure. Well, from a leadership perspective, I don't think any of these would surprise you, right? And we look at this in a few different ways here, right? We look at what is our workforce planning telling us are some of the needed skills in our company, right? And then we look for what are our people asking for, right? When they're searching for course content, what are they looking for and asking for? And from a maybe middle manager perspective first, right? Those individuals really are looking for a blend of some of the new skills that relate to technology because the middle manager today is managing technology. We all work in IT now, right? A middle manager today is managing technology in some cases almost as much as they're managing a team. So, the use of automation, the language around AI, how it applies to their work, all that is a skill orbit that we're seeing more and more in our middle managers. Beyond that, you have those classic management skills, right? And what companies tend to do on those is they'll kind of keep the pedal to the floor for a while on feedback, delegation, building up someone around their strength, the core management techniques. And then once things get to be in good shape, they kind of pull back, right?
Yeah.
And then we lose that attention and focus. And what the best companies do is they keep focused on that all the time. So they keep up that level of management skills. So I'd say it's that mix of kind of tech plus classic skills that are most top of mind for middle managers. For senior leaders, say you're vice presidents and above, I mean, the business environment right now is perhaps the most chaotic we've seen in most of our careers, right? And that's external factor, internal factor, all those things. And the traditional way of working for senior leaders, multi-year plan, fishbone analysis, pulling back and driving roadmap, building senior relationships, those things get harder in a world where you have day by day change, right? Literally day by day change. So for our senior leaders, really trying to focus on what does it mean to be agile and resilient. Those are buzzwords, right? But what that really means is how are you having the right pacing with an organization to not chase every single day-to-day variation, but also not be blind to trends that are occurring and emerging over time. So that's certainly one for most senior leaders in big organizations. And then, beyond that, the technology bit applies there as well, right? Where every company is making huge investments in this space and not chasing the shiny object. But what makes sense for your business is something that our senior leaders deal with here, as they do everywhere.
That's great inputs, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I can talk a little bit about how we are seeing this from our client base and the clients that we work with. So a couple of things that we are hearing. One, of course, communication skills, right? With the amount of chaos and change that we are all seeing, communication and just being very clear with what's expected and how should the work be done and what support do you need becomes critical and important. Change management. We are dealing with change on a constant basis. Everything is about how are you managing change for yourself as an individual, but then also how are you helping your teams manage change, and then collaboration. And I think COVID was a great example of showing that in this day and age you can't win by yourself. You need collaborators. You need to collaborate with your other stakeholders, internal, external. And so how are you doing that becomes important. So these are some of the three things that we are hearing from our client base.
Yeah, I would second your point on communication. I think we've all been tested in this environment to be even more simple, even more clear, and sometimes even a little bit more directive to make sure people understand a request or a strategy.
I'm going to move us to one of your favorite topics, Jeff, and you've done extensive work on this, which is performance management and its connection to leadership development. Now, one of the things that we often get as a query from potential clients is, look, my manager is very good doing their functional and operational work, and that's why they got promoted. But now they are unable to make that empathetic connection with their team members and help their team members grow, right? Now, you've done extensive work on bringing concepts like check-in into the performance management system, taking eyes off from rating and numbers to building connections and relationships. Wanted to get your perspectives on, in this day and age, especially with technology coming in, what are your two or three guidance or feedback or inputs on how can managers build better relationship with their team members?
Yes, you're right, Ritwik. I have been in this at this party for a long time. Specifically, the uh, this does get back to kind of a classic organization challenge, which is selection of managers, right? If we're promoting functional experts that don't have management skill or maybe desire, that gets back to a selection point that every company needs to figure out how they want to work that issue, right?
Right.
But obviously, that's something to solve for um, as you think through managers. But once you have them in place, we're actually here right now developing I would call it a manager excellence portfolio, which is
Okay.
our version of that expected as you grow up in the business, as you become a people leader, expected program, quote unquote,
Mhm.
for the manager. And as part of that, we are working on some of those fundamentals of good management, how to have a performance conversation, how to give feedback, all those good things, right?
Right.
And where the team really pushed my thinking on this one was as opposed to the traditional way of teaching those skills, right? And you could use lots of ways to do that. They reimagined all those parts of the management lifecycle, call it, using our AI tools. So,
Mm.
how I would prepare for a performance conversation, perhaps a challenging performance conversation in the age of a large language model, is different
Right.
than how I would have prepared for that 3 years ago, right? How I
Right.
plan to roadmap and delegate work is different. So, this gets back to that almost co-pilot concept, right? How can AI help you? So I just thought it was good work by the team that now we're working these issues, but even for those folks who aren't the natural empathetic person, have the AI help you out. So when you get into the
Yeah.
conversation, it's going to give you a bit more of a script to
Yeah.
have some of the conversations. So that's one way we've thought about it here.
So I think, Jeff, then it becomes important for the individual to be able to flex their style, right? Even though you may have an ingrained way in which you are approaching your team members and building relationships, you need to be able to flex in that moment and learn from what AI is coaching you, and bring that to the fore and bring that into the conversation.
Yeah,
That,
this gets back to the point about followership, right? It's
yeah,
it's about them, it's not about you, right?
yeah,
When you're having that conversation, taking 1 minute ahead of that conversation to think about where they're coming from and where their head is going
right.
to help you adjust versus here's my way of doing it, and I'm not going to edit my model based on who you are.
And so I think it's also equally important then for organizations to spend some time in shifting that mindset, enabling that new mindset, right? And that's just a conversation to be had with potential leaders or professionals who are getting promoted into that space with which will have people reporting into you, right? Helping them understand that this is the new way, and you taking on some significant responsibility. There's expectations from you, and walking them through this mindset shift that is required.
You're totally right, right? At a lot of companies on Friday, you're a individual contributor. On
Right,
Monday, you're a people leader, and there's no symbolic transition, right? I mean,
right,
think about other things in life where things change and there's a symbol, a graduation, a
yeah,
wedding, right?
yeah. You're
Um,
right.
a bar mitzvah. These things
Yeah,
are symbols of change. And at work,
absolutely.
for most companies, well, I'm a manager now, and
Yeah,
no one really told me what it means, and no one
yeah,
told me what's expected, and no one made it meaningful as a transition for me.
yeah,
So that's a point where I think we can influence.
yeah. Absolutely. Um, Let me get to the next question, which is coming in with a bit of data point here. So, a recent global survey by KNOLSKAPE recorded an average rating of 7.8 on 10 on the importance of culture readiness for AI implementation, right? So, a lot of organizations are
Sure.
talking about things that need to be in place before you jump into the AI journey, culture being one of them. However, the rating on satisfaction with the current cultural readiness was much lower. It was at about 5.7. on 10. Now, you've worked with several enterprise wide cultural transformations. How do you explain this variance between where it should be and where it is? Um, and what can leaders do in order to reduce that variance or that gap?
Mm. Yeah, we've looked at what are the primary things that companies can do to drive adoption and experimentation with AI, right?
Mhm.
AI being a tool, unlike if you're getting trained on Microsoft Excel, right? It was one way. We could teach you how to use it. It didn't change that often, right? With
Right.
AI, it changes every day. So
Yeah.
that experimentation consideration is more important than learning how to use it. And
Hmm.
what we saw, like a lot of culture change, initiatives like you mentioned there, Ritwik, is AI adoption is a function of leadership adoption and
Yeah.
leadership's ability to talk about how they're using it and where they have
Yeah.
succeeded and where they have failed with it, right?
Yeah.
Versus training the tool. So we've spent a lot of time on driving our leaders towards it and helping them
Mhm.
understand how to adopt. So that's a key point for us. The second point here is on relevant use cases. So our business
Mhm.
has kind of every function inside of it, right? From early
Right.
research through commercialization, we do it all as a business,
Right.
right? And how you use AI in early stage drug development versus how you use AI later in the life cycle of that product is on the same set of skills, but different use cases. So being more specific, here's how you could use it. Example A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's
Hmm.
helping us too in terms of going that last mile from conceptual to execution.
Right.
And the third one I've learned is, everyone's real curious about governance and
Right.
protection for AI. And
Mhm.
one thing that stops people from experimenting is not
Yeah.
fully understanding the safeguards that are in place on
Yeah.
AI. On AI.
Mhm.
Once they get the safeguards and understand it, they get to be more willing to play. So I
Mhm.
think those might be some of the reasons you have that variance in those
All
results.
right. All right. Great, Jeff. So I'm taking top-down approach, right? Being very specific
Yep.
on how to use AI, and safeguards in place, and communicating to the larger enterprise on what safeguards are in place, and then letting them experiment. I think that's a word that I'm hearing a lot, experimentation, and I think that goes hand in hand with things like curiosity, growth mindset, learning agility. And I think all of that is critical. Like you're saying, things are changing on us on a day to day basis, right? And we've got to be able to understand how technology is impacting what I'm doing and then be able to bring that into my work in order to become more efficient, in order to become more impactful. Um, yeah, and otherwise, roles are at stake, jobs are at stake.
And it's all in that, what's the quote? Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah,
It's all
yeah,
in that department. All those
absolutely.
things, our work world is changing so quickly that
Right,
I think our future success is
right.
in a lot of the ways contingent, in many ways, contingent on our ability to deal with the discomfort of this
Yeah,
change.
yeah. And I think you can't now sit back, relax, and say, I've got a job, I've got a place to stay, and be at it and continue doing the same thing over and over for years to come. So, is there a way, Jeff, that organizations can hire for this kind of a skill, knowing, are people comfortable moving out of comfort zone on a regular basis, identifying what needs to change and then being able to make that change happen? Is there a direction you are seeing organizations take to ensure that the hiring process is changing and people who are coming in are have that kind of mindset and have that kind of attitude and skill?
And I mean, now you're looking at some of the personality research, right? And I mean,
Mm.
there's, but when organizations hire, you can hire for skills, or you can kind of hire for will, right?
Right,
Hire for who the person is, and
right,
I mean, it's certainly able to be assessed, right? How change friendly is somebody? How willing are they to experiment? Those kinds of things have been assessed for years through personality assessment. And I think some companies are thinking more about more broad use of that, because the skill part, we can teach you the skill.
Yeah,
but who
absolutely.
you are is in a lot of ways more durable than the skills you have.
I think that's going to be critical, and I think we should be talking a lot more about it, because once you bring in a person and if that person has a hard set mind, it starts to impact the rest of the ecosystem or people that they are interacting with and working along with. So I think that's going to be crucial for organizations to look at in the coming years. Jeff, can you share a story or anecdote from your career that you feel reinforce the importance of human connection? We've been talking about empathy, emotional intelligence, and making that connection in corporate learning.
I mean, not maybe Ritwik, it's about me as a learner, right? And a kind of role modeling, right? I have found that when senior leaders can come in and contextualize with stories, concepts, that's what takes it from almost that book knowledge to something you can go and use, because they're taking it and turning it into reality. It's someone who did it successfully, right? And I can remember being maybe my kids were a lot younger, right? They were I don't know, 2 and 6 maybe, something like that. And we had a senior leader come in, successful senior leader, talk about in detail how he was able to be successful in his portfolio and his work while managing the real reality of littler kids in his life. And it was just that moment where I was going through the same thing. And I saw a path forward put together by somebody else that I was able to then take and modify and use myself. And that to me, I connected with him as an individual. I learned stuff I could use, and then it worked out for me. So that's kind of like the total package, right? In terms of empathy, skill, and leadership.
And I think it's becoming very important for us to look at leaders as humans, or even leaders to portray themselves as humans and become vulnerable as well. And that's where the real authentic connections happen and people start to become more approachable as leaders.
Yeah, it's the foundation of trust, right? Once you have a trusting relationship with someone, it's really easy to have hard conversations, or easier to have hard conversations, because they know that you believe in them.
Yeah, and you've got their best interest at heart. Jeff, let's talk about the elephant in the room: cost savings and leadership development. What are you seeing as a trend in organizations from a spend perspective towards leadership development? Given what we spoke about in the opening context, that there's a globally connected economy, there are places where it's weak, that's impacting some of the spends on discretional. It's a discretionary fund, and so it's impacting the spend on learning and leadership development. So in that kind of a scenario, as a CLO, what do you do to still be impactful from a leadership development perspective?
I think you're right that it's certainly true that all of the people and HR functions are expected to become more efficient over time, right? Our senior leaders can see that, automation, et cetera, can help to pick up some of the administrative parts of these functions, right? Sure. Leadership development, a little bit of a different animal, right? If I think about getting funding for leadership development initiatives, over the entirety of my career in more difficult economic scenarios, right? Think about the 2008 housing crash. Think about COVID, right? Well, do you need to argue more? Do you need to have a better business case? Absolutely, you do. But I have found, especially when your funder is senior enough in the organization, you will find a way. You will find a way for those populations that matter the most to that business. And as chief learning officers, sometimes it takes a little bit of bravery to move money around your budget, to say
Right.
we're going to deprioritize this for a period of time, or we're going to find a less expensive way to teach that hard skill, and we're going to
Right.
relocate some of those monies towards developing leaders. So is it harder work in a harder economy? Sure it is. But I have been able to be successful in pulling on different levers to get the job done.
Great point, Jeff. And I think it's also what you do before you get into this economic scenario also is important. Have you shown that impact? Have you shown the relevance? Have you shown the criticality of leadership development to the organization? And then are you showing true organizational citizenship behavior during that scenario where you're saying, okay, I am with the organization, I need to be able to pull back on some of the fundings and move the money around as you're talking about. So
and it's in service of the company's objectives, right?
absolutely.
And I think
Absolutely.
most senior leaders know that. Sometimes, everyone needs a little reminder sometimes.
Yeah. Jeff, my final question to you, for all the folks that are aspiring to be CLOs or are CLOs or getting into a CLO role, you've played the CLO role in large organizations, MNCs, complex organizations. What is your guidance to them on what are some key attributes for being successful as a CLO?
Hmm. I think I try to be organizational citizen. I'll pick up your word, Ritwik. Enterprise thinker, just a
Right.
leader in the company first, and a CLO second. And
Right.
A risk of the CLO role is that it can become a little bit religious, right? Learning is awesome, and learning is the answer. And it is the answer in a lot of ways, but not in all ways. So
Yeah.
your credibility is enhanced when you're an
Right.
enterprise leader first and a functional leader second. That would apply in any specialist role like this.
Right. Right.
Maybe a second piece of advice would be kind of pick an angle, right? What's the source code that will make your CLO tenure different? What's the thing you believe in or you have seen work that you can draw from, right?
Right.
And then the third one would be the CLO role is one where you need to build a community of supporters around you. And that can be informal, it can be in governance, like I've done here. But I am but a vessel for helping this company learn. I am not the full answer. So helping get friends and family around you will help you be more successful too.
I think I like that analogy about being a vessel. You're just a conduit. You're just a enabler in that way. And I think one other critical skill is also about systems thinking. Is do you know how the organization operates? Do you know how the various functions come together? Are you able to then connect with the business leaders and be able to talk to them about, where things are low, where things are high? How do you make sure that it's equitable in terms of skills and leadership so that the organization is moving forward? So I think just having that understanding is also critical as a success to being a
Agreed.
CLO. Jeff, thank you so much. Just tons and tons of insights for our listeners. I'm sure they would love to hear this. Take some points back, and make those changes or make those shifts in the way that they approach work, in their behaviors, in their habits. Can't thank you enough. I know you're extremely tied up and busy at this moment, so thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us and talking to us. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the week, Jeff.
Awesome. Yeah, always great to spend time with you and the KNOLSKAPE team, Ritwik. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
Cheers.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye.